All right, let's dive right into this explainer. We're going to unpack the staggering global stakes of what is easily one of the world's most talked about geopolitical flashpoints. We're looking at a massive maritime dispute that brings together international law, trillion-dollar economies, and some seriously rising military tensions.
As your guide today, the central question we really need to tackle is this. Why does China want this specific body of water so badly? I mean, what is driving a global superpower to risk severe international backlash over these specific reefs and waters?
To truly grasp the urgency here, you just have to look at the numbers. And honestly, they're massive. We aren't just talking about a couple of remote islands. We're looking at roughly 65% of the entire world's maritime trade passing right through this vital global choke point. That is an estimated $3 to $5 trillion flowing through these waters. Think about it. If a nation can control this space, they essentially hold the power to paralyze global maritime trade.
To understand the core drivers behind China's motivations, our agenda today covers the battle for resources, strategic depth and military might, the century of humiliation, the 2016 UN close ruling, and finally, the dangerous gray zone tactics unfolding today. Section 1. The battle for resources, unlocking the wealth beneath the waves. Now, the sheer scale of the unexploited reserves hidden down there is pretty staggering. As reported by the Council on Foreign Relations, we are looking at an estimated 11 billion barrels of untapped oil and 190 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. For neighboring countries, especially the Philippines, accessing areas like the Rebank is absolutely crucial for their own energy security.
But, it goes way beyond just fuel for energy. Controlling these waters also means access to highly lucrative commercial fishing grounds and incredibly rich marine biodiversity. China actually needs these immense resources to sustain its vast population and keep fueling its rapidly expanding economy. So the ocean here isn't just water to them. It's a literal lifeline of sustenance and wealth.
Section 2. Strategic depth and military might. Securing the maritime choke point. So, looking at this from a geopolitical perspective, controlling this sea gives China what military strategists call strategic depth. Basically, this geographic buffer allows Beijing to project its naval power outward, right into the broader Indo-Pacific. It's a highly calculated move to secure its massive energy imports and manufacturing exports, making sure they can't be blockaded, while at the same time countering the influence of the United States and its allies in the region. And if you look at satellite imagery, you can see China aggressively reclaiming land. They're transforming these basic, tiny reefs into heavily fortified military outposts. Over in the Paracel and Spratly Islands, they've constructed ports, built airstrips for military-grade aircraft, and deployed everything from advanced radar systems to cruise missiles and fighter jets. They are literally building their strategic depth from the seafloor up.
Section 3. The century of humiliation, history, identity, and nationalism.
To really understand this, we have to look back at history. From China's perspective, the period from 1839 to 1949 was known as the Century of Humiliation, a deeply painful era marked by foreign intervention and a huge loss of sovereignty. Then, in 1947, they published the famous 9-line map, officially laying claim to these waters. And by 1949, with the founding of the People's Republic of China under Mao Zedong, that era of suffering was basically declared over. This history of territorial loss drives a deeply powerful, identity-based need to reclaim what they feel is rightfully theirs.
In fact, according to academic researchers who analyze Chinese foreign policy, this isn't just about strategy. It's fundamentally an emotional, nation-building narrative. They see it as reclaiming the lost territories that have been unjustly occupied or stolen from them by previous aggressors. It's intricately tied to their national pride and a fierce resistance to past foreign domination. For them, securing the sea is all about righting historical wrongs. But of course, we now have to contrast these internal motivations with actual international law.
Section 4. The 2016 UN close ruling, international law versus historical claims.
Here, we can clearly see the two totally opposing viewpoints clashing right now. On one side, we have China's sweeping historical claims, symbolized by that 9-line we just talked about, which they argue dates back some 2,000 years. On the other side, we have the modern legal framework of the oceans, the Philippines asserting its rights within its 200-mile exclusive economic zone, or EEZ, which was established under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, better known as UN CLOS. Well, this clash finally came to a head legally. In 2016, the Permanent Court of Arbitration at The Hague actually ruled overwhelmingly in favor of the Philippines on almost every single count. This tribunal legally invalidated China's historical basis for their claims, legally affirming the Philippines' sovereign rights to the resources within its own EEZ. However, and this is a big however, despite this landmark legally binding victory that's recognized as customary international law, China firmly refuses to accept the court's authority or recognize the ruling whatsoever.
Section 5. Dangerous Gray Zone Tactics. The Daily Reality at Sea.
Now, because outright war is incredibly costly and super unpredictable, China employs what experts call gray zone tactics. These are coercive actions and dangerous maneuvers designed to harass foreign vessels, block resupply missions, and slowly assert de facto control over the region. The catch here is that they do all this while staying just below the threshold that would spark a full-blown military retaliation.
The progression of these tactics over time has escalated drastically, and it's pretty alarming. Step 1 was simply piling sand on existing reefs to build those outposts, but recently things have seriously intensified. We've seen harassment using military-grade lasers and high-pressure water cannons against Philippine ships, and most concerningly, this has evolved into direct, intentional ship collisions at sea, with some really intense encounters happening as recently as June 2026.
You know, it's kind of fascinating how a multi-trillion-dollar global conflict can center on such highly localized, tiny flashpoints. Take the Second Thomas Shoal, for example. The focal point of a lot of this recent aggression is the BRP Sierra Madre. It's literally a rusting World War II-era ship that the Philippines intentionally grounded on a reef back in 1999 just to reinforce its territorial claims. Today, a small, completely isolated Philippine military contingent is stationed on that decaying vessel, relying on those heavily harassed resupply missions just to survive.
Of course, in response to this daily aggression, claimant nations aren't just standing by. They are actively building up their defenses, and that is drawing major global powers much deeper into the region's security architecture. The Philippines has increased its base access and joint exercises with the United States. Crucially, Washington confirmed that their mutual defense treaty absolutely covers public vessels in the South China Sea. Meanwhile, Japan has significantly stepped up, selling military equipment and warships to both the Philippines and Vietnam to help them boost their maritime security and deter further aggression. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We have trillions of dollars in trade, vast untapped energy reserves, and deep-seated national pride all colliding in a space governed by contested international law. As the whole world watches these dangerous gray zone tactics play out around rusting warships, how will this high-stakes standoff ultimately end? Will diplomacy find a way through the tension, or are we watching the slow escalation of Asia's next major conflict? Thanks so much for joining me to explore the mechanics behind this massive global dispute.